Arachin Daf, when they started building the Beis Hamikdash, it was usher to receive any gifts, even water and salt from the Goyim. According to Rashi, because we were concerned that if the Goyim had a say in the matter by giving money, will cause a rifyoin, the Beis Hamikdash will be delayed. According to Taisvus, we don't want that the Goyim should say, we own part of the Beis Hamikdash. At the end of the building of the Beis Hamikdash, by the completion part, then you're allowed to receive gifts from the Goy. However, we cannot receive from them a very specific gift, such as a crow chaser and something that has a name, because that's a bizayon for the Beis Hamikdash, and we don't want the Goyim to boast and say, look, that part is mine. But we see that the king Koresh, or it was Daryavish, did donate to the Beis Hamikdash in the beginning process of the building of the Beis Hamikdash, and that is because a king keeps his word. Once a king says that he's going to build, he builds. If a king says he's going to uproot a mountain, he'll uproot a mountain. And that, of course, is because Koresh or Daryavish, they had good intent at the time when they made the donation. In our days, if a goy, meaning not in the time of Beis Hamikdash, if a goy is mafresh truma, he separates truma from his food, from his grain, then we have to check. If he's mafresh it and says he'll give it to the kohen, that's okay. But if he intended l'shem shamayim, then it's asur bahana. Bisman hazeh, there's nothing to do with it, and we have to bury it. The same thing is if a guy donates, let's say, a beam for the building of a shul. So if he intends l'shem shamayim, then what we have to do is we have to bury it. But if he does it al das Yisrael, just to give it for the Jews, if it has the Shem Hashem on it, there's a chiddush that all you need to do is just cut out the Shem Hashem and the rest of the beam is okay. I would think that perhaps the Shem Hashem is mispashed, it goes through the entire beam and it's also to use, but you're allowed to just cut out that part. Tzedakah, says the Gemara, is similar to Hegdish, that is the Isra of Baal Ta'acher. Once you promise to give tzedakah and there's a poor person in the vicinity, you must give it right away. If a person says, this selah I'm giving to tzedakah, he's permitted to borrow that money or let his friend borrow it as long as he repays it later on. According to Reb Zeira, if he says zu, selah zu, this specific selah, then it turns into a nidava and it's no longer his and he cannot borrow it. Rava says the opposite. Since he's chayiv and achrayis, then it's better for the tzedakah and therefore he could borrow that money. A gabbai tzedakah, someone that's in charge of tzedakah, of collecting money from others, so once it reaches his hands, it's as if it reached tzedakah, and therefore he shouldn't be allowed to borrow against it. Now, in a case where the aniyim benefit from him borrowing, because now the tzedakah is depleted and now he can force other people to give money towards the tzedakah, so the aniyim actually want him to borrow the money, then it's mutter for him to borrow it. A Jew who donates a candelabra, a silver or golden candelabra, to the shul, you can change the designation for a dvar mitzvah. You can take it from the shul and give it to something else that's a mitzvah. But if it's a goy that donated it, it's also because a goy will cry about it, will bother him, he'll make a commotion, and therefore it's also. If a person he's a panhandler, he goes from city to city, the Gemara brings a story where a goy donated to a shul, and they designated it to something else, and there's a kpeid on it because even though he's a panhandler, he goes from city to city, there's a possibility that he'll come back to the city and he'll see that his donation is no longer there, and he'll make a fuss, and we don't want that to happen. Says the Mishnah, a person that's a goisis, he's holding near death, he has no monetary value, and therefore you can't make a neder on him. You can't say, I want to donate his amount of money because he's not worth anything. And he's also not the subject of Erechin, he's not ne'erach, because it says in the pasuk, V'hemid v'herech, he has to stand up, and he's not capable of standing up. What about a person that's on death row and they're leading him out to be killed? He doesn't have any monetary value because he's about to be killed, but he could stand up. So therefore, you can't make a neder on him. And according to the Tanakama, you can't even do nerach. He can't be the subject of erechin. Why? Because it says in the pasuk, kol cherem, anybody that's condemned to death, lo yivda. He's not in the parsha of Pidyon, he can't be part of haracha. And of course, this is talking about there was a gemar din and he's going to die. And the Gemara brings a drasha, Min Adam, not all people are like that. According to Rabbi Chananya ben Akavia, since there's a specific amount of money in haracha and erichin, so there is a haracha, he is nerach, and the pasuk Kol Chayrim comes to teach us that a person who is chayiv misa b'shoygig, he can't get out of it by paying up. There is a case that if a person's axe, that's a mu'at, kills another human being, he has to pay. The Torah says he's condemned to death. It doesn't really mean death. It means he has to pay kaifer. Yet in other situations, let's say he's Michal Shabbos b'shoygig, in that situation, it's not enough to pay to make your way out. You have to do other tshuva. If somebody is condemned to death and they're bringing him out to die, according to everybody, he himself can make a neder, he himself could be magdish something, and he could be the person that's ma'arich, that does, he says, Er Eli, or not Er Eli, because he has no erech, but other people's erech, maybe Er Eli as well. The machlokes is whether or not, if he damages somebody else, do his inheritors, his yorshim, do they have to pay? Two ways to view the machlokes. Do we say that it's only a milva al peh, it's a very weak obligation that he owes, and since we can't bring him to Bezdin because we can't prolong his suffering, so he's condemned to death right away, and now it falls on the yorshim, and it's only a milva al peh, do they have to pay? Do yorshim pay a milva al peh or not? The other way to look at it is, perhaps it's a milva aksuv b'Torah, since the obligation is from the Torah that he has to pay, so now it becomes a much stronger one, it's as if there's a shtar, and yorshim are obligated to pay, or perhaps not, it's not a milva aksuv b'Torah. Have a wonderful day, have a great Shabbos.